So, as someone who is a huge fan of Friends, I was so sad when Matthew Perry died back in October of last year. And on one hand, I realised that he'd spent a number of decades battling with alcoholism and drug addiction. But at the same time, I felt that people did need to be held responsible for their roles in his death. So now we have this news coming out that 5 people have been arrested, which to me is a positive step forward. Matthew Perry was always very open about his struggles with addiction. He went to rehab many times over the years, and he spent millions trying to get and stay clean. He even said that he wanted to help others who were struggling with addiction, and that he wanted that to be his legacy. And yet perhaps with these new arrests, maybe it will be his legacy. At the time that he died in last October, Perry was receiving legitimate treatment for depression and anxiety by getting ketamine infusions at a doctor's office. But according to the US attorney, he wanted more than what he was receiving and actually became addicted. As we now know, he was able to obtain more K from other doctors who were willing to violate their oath to sell it to him so he could inject it at home. So let's talk about these 5 arrests. I'm going to break them down a little bit. So central to all of this is Perry's assistant, Kenneth Iwamasa, who was not only responsible for sourcing illegal ketamine for Perry from 2 different sources, but also, despite having no medical knowledge or experience, was the person responsible for administering the drug via injection to his boss, and that includes the fatal dose. One of the sources where Perry's assistant was claiming was getting ketamine was a doctor by the name of Salvador Plasencia, who he was not only supplying the drug, but he also taught Perry's assistant how to administer it, and he also provided the necessary equipment. Apparently he supplied 20 vials of ketamine over a 2-month period at a cost of $55,000. Obviously he was more interested in making money than worrying about the risks that it posed to Perry. And he was aware of the risks, obviously, not only because he was a doctor, but one occasion when he himself had dosed Perry up with ketamine, Perry's blood pressure spiked, and yet he was still willing to continue to provide the drug and to allow Perry's assistant to be responsible for its administration. He clearly didn't care about breaking his oath as a doctor, and he certainly wasn't concerned about the risks to Perry. When he found out that Matthew Perry was interested in buying ketamine on the black market, he saw this as an opportunity to make a profit. He wrote in a text message in September 2023, "I wonder how much this moron will pay." And like I said, he jacked up the price to more than 10 times what it was worth. He wasn't interested in being ethical, he was interested in making money. He also broke confidentiality. He told another patient at his clinic that Perry was spiralling out of control with his addiction. And at the same time, he still continued to provide Perry with drugs, including, on the 2nd of October, he provided him with ketamine lozenges, which he had obtained from a fraudulent prescription, which he had gotten from another doctor, and I'll talk about him soon. After Perry's death, Plasencia also falsified medical records and notes to try and make it look like what he was doing was legitimate. He's pleaded not guilty at this point in time, but I think given that 3 people have pleaded guilty, I'm presuming that there's a deal on the table somewhere there, so I'm guessing this guy is going to go down. So another doctor by the name of Mark Chavez was responsible for selling the ketamine to Perry's doctor. So he was the next up in the chain. And he was also the one that was providing the fraudulent prescriptions for ketamine lozenges. He has pleaded guilty for his involvement in the provision of the ketamine and for Perry's subsequent death. Now, like I said, there were 2 different sources for the ketamine for Perry, where his assistant was sourcing the ketamine. So the other source was a woman called Jasmine Sangs, also known as the Ketamine Queen. And her go-between was a guy by the name of Eric Fleming, who, as it turns out, was a small-time film producer. So there's a bit of a Hollywood connection there. He was taking advantage of his connection to make a bit of money. And it was actually ketamine that was supplied by this woman, which was the cause of Perry's death. She had sold him 50 vials over a 2-week period at a cost of $11,000. So, according to investigators, they said that she ran an emporium of illegal drugs, selling quite a huge range of not just street drugs, but also illegally obtained prescription drugs. And the list of things that they seized when they arrested her is huge. I think they mentioned 80 vials of ketamine, for starters, and then you had a whole range of other drugs as well. So the day that Perry died, she knew she was culpable. She sent a message to the go-between, Eric Fleming, on an app called Signal app, telling him to delete all their messages. And it's not like this was the first time either when she had been responsible for the death of someone. So she knew what she was doing. In 2019, there was another person who she had sold ketamine to who died directly as a result from having her ketamine. And she's pled not guilty, although I think we can tell that she's going to go away for a very, very, very long time. And she is being held without bail. So let's go back to Perry's assistant. So he has pleaded guilty. I guess, it would have been pretty hard for him to deny any of it. He was injecting Perry with approximately 6 to 8 shots of ketamine per day between October 24th and 27th. And this is the thing that really gets me, there were at least 2 occasions where he had injected Perry with ketamine and subsequently found him unconscious as a result of those injections. And yet, on the day that Perry died, he gave him 3 separate shots of ketamine through that day. The third shot was administered while Perry was either in or near the jacuzzi, and then straight after administering that shot, Iwamasa left to run errands for him. So he knew that Perry had had reactions to the ketamine before. He had found him previously unconscious because of the ketamine. And yet he gave him a ketamine injection when he was either getting into the jacuzzi or already in the jacuzzi. And then he went out. And of course it was him who discovered Perry was deceased when he returned. And we know from all the reports that Perry's cause of death was cited as being the result of acute effects of ketamine. So Perry's family have issued the following statement. We were and still are heartbroken by Matthew's death, but it has helped to know law enforcement has taken his case very seriously. We look forward to justice taking its course. So the trials for the 3 people who have pled guilty are scheduled for next month. And let's hope that justice is served and they go away for a long time. And just maybe, with this prosecution happening, there will be other people who step back and think about the consequences of what they are doing when they provide addicts like Matthew Perry with drugs that can potentially end their lives.